They didn't knock. They didn't call. They just left a letter, folded twice and tucked beneath the ceramic angel my daughter had painted 2 summers ago, the one that guarded the little cherry blossom tree we planted for her. It was early, barely past 6 a.m., and I was already awake, sitting on the porch swing with a mug of coffee and the silence of grief. The tree had started to bloom again, timid pink petals stretching out into the spring morning. It made me feel like she was still here. Still laughing. Still mine. The envelope had the HOA logo, blue, bland, passive-aggressive. I didn't open it at first. Something about it felt wrong. Heavy. But I did. And I read the words twice, then a third time. Violation notice, unauthorized planting of vegetation on front lawn common property. You are hereby required to remove the non-compliant tree within 10 days to avoid escalating fines and further HOA action. I read it again. And again. And again. They meant her tree. The one we planted after the accident. The one we dug for with our bare hands, crying and shaking and not knowing what else to do but make something live in a world that felt so broken. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I walked to the sidewalk, looked at the tree, then looked back at the letter. They wanted it gone. Like she had never been here. Like her memory was an eyesore. We live in a neighborhood called Silver Pines, a name that used to feel comforting, idyllic, even. Tree-lined streets, white fences, and family barbecues. Until the board elections 2 years ago, when a new president took over. Cynthia Albrecht. Retired school administrator. HOA president, self-appointed guardian of visual harmony. She didn't like clutter, unapproved decorations, or anything that disrupted the design flow. She hated our tree. She just hadn't made it official, until now. At 8:30 a.m., I sent an email to the HOA. I asked politely for clarification. I attached a picture of the tree, the plaque at its base with my daughter's name, and a link to the local news article from when we first planted it. The one titled, Memorial Tree Honors Local Child Killed in Bike Accident. At 10:12 a.m., Cynthia replied, Your emotional circumstances are unfortunate, but all residents must comply with HOA landscaping regulations. Trees require pre-approval. This one was not approved. Unfortunate. That's what she called it. By lunchtime, I was shaking. I called my sister. She offered to help. We'll appeal. We'll go to the press if we have to. I told her they'll never cut it down. But inside, I was scared. Because I'd seen what this HOA could do. When the Martinsons had a gnome in their front yard, they got a $500 fine. When the Thompsons added a bench to their porch, it was non-compliant architecture. When I hung holiday lights too early one year, I got a warning for premature seasonal expression. They thrived on rules. Rules that meant nothing until they were used to punish. So I started recording. Emails. Meetings. Phone calls. I bought a camera for the front porch. I documented every conversation. If they were going to come for my daughter's tree, then they were going to regret it. The HOA meeting that month was held in the community center, beige walls, folding chairs, stale coffee, and the lingering scent of entitlement. I sat near the back, pretending to scroll my phone while my lapel mic quietly recorded every word. I had no intention of speaking. I wanted to observe, document, gather everything. Cynthia stood at the front like she was moderating a national debate, not a neighborhood meeting. Her voice had that smooth, controlled sharpness, the kind of tone that sounded polite unless you were the one being targeted. She ran through the agenda. Discussion of new lawn maintenance standards. Concerns about non-regulation mailbox colors. A brief note on unauthorized plantings. That was me. When she got to item 3, she cleared her throat. A resident recently planted a tree in a front lawn common area without the appropriate submission and approval. While we sympathize with personal circumstances, this community must uphold consistency. If we allow one unapproved element, Where does it stop? Where does it stop? It stops when you try to erase a dead child's memory, that's where. I didn't say that aloud. But someone else did. A woman near the front raised her hand. I'm sorry, she said. Are you talking about the memorial tree for the Ellis girl? Cynthia shifted in her flats. We do not reference individual homeowners or personal issues during these discussions. But the woman didn't drop it. She was 9, the woman said. That tree has a nameplate. You made her mother remove Halloween lights last year, and now this? The room shifted. Some heads turned. Some stayed down. But the tension thickened. I wanted to hug that woman. The next day, I found a notice in my mailbox. HOA citation escalation, daily fines to begin in 48 hours. They were doubling down. So was I. I emailed the local newspaper that afternoon, the same reporter who had covered my daughter's accident 2 years ago. I attached a scanned copy of the violation, a photo of the tree, and a simple subject line. HOA wants me to cut down my daughter's memorial tree. By morning, she replied. I remember you. I'm sorry this is happening. Let's talk. We met at a cafe down the street. I brought the letter. She brought a notepad and the same steel-eyed compassion I remembered from that awful spring. She asked, do you want to go public? I nodded. Because I had nothing left to lose. Because they had already taken the most important thing in my world. She said, I'll reach out to the HOA for comment. And I smiled for the first time in weeks. The article went live 2 days later. Silver Pines HOA orders grieving mother to remove child's memorial tree. By noon, the post had over 1,500 shares. By night, it hit the local news. I watched Cynthia on TV, caught outside her house by a reporter. We're simply following established guidelines. We can't make exceptions. That's how chaos begins. Chaos. That's what she called a tree with a little girl's name on it. I received an anonymous letter that evening. No return address. Just a single line. Keep fighting. She deserves that tree. And for the first time, in a long, long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. By the end of that week, I was being watched. It started small. A silver SUV idling near my driveway longer than usual. A woman jogging by, except she wasn't jogging, not really. Just walking fast, circling the block twice in an hour. And then, 2 nights in a row, I heard the sound of gravel crunching near the side gate. I checked the footage from my porch camera. There it was, 11:42 p.m. Someone in a hooded jacket walking along the hedge, pointing a flashlight at the tree. I saved the video. Then I emailed it to myself, my sister, and the reporter, just in case. The next morning, I printed a sign and staked it in front of the tree. This tree is under video surveillance. Attempts to damage or remove it will be prosecuted. A few hours later, I got an email from Cynthia. Posting signage on front lawns without approval is also a violation. Please remove the sign or face additional penalties. She was threatening me for protecting a tree she was trying to erase. That weekend, I went door to door with a petition. Not everyone answered. Some people pretended not to be home. But a surprising number opened the door, looked at me, and said some version of, "Good. It's about time someone stood up to her." By Sunday night, I had 56 signatures. I scanned them and attached them to a formal appeal to the HOA board. And this time, I copied the city's community affairs liaison. And the newspaper. And Cynthia's favorite phrase, for transparency, I used it liberally. 2 days later, I received a strange message from a block number. You don't want to play this game. You're not the only one who's lost something. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I forwarded it to the reporter. Then the police. It didn't scare me. It infuriated me. Because now it wasn't just about a tree. It was about intimidation. Power. Control. The following Monday, the newspaper ran a follow-up piece. HOA president accused of targeting memorial site, residents speak out. This time, they included quotes. Neighbors who had been fined for minor infractions. A retired veteran who said Cynthia made him repaint his flagpole. One woman said her autistic son's therapy swing had been ruled non-conforming. The picture that formed was clear. Cynthia wasn't about rules. She was about domination. And slowly, the tide began to turn. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, a man knocked on my door. He looked nervous. Early 50s, work boots, HOA committee badge pinned to his flannel. I probably shouldn't be here, he said. But I thought you should know, she's planning a surprise inspection this week. Early morning. Maybe even with a removal crew. Are you serious? He nodded. She wants it gone before the next board meeting. Before the petition can be heard. I thanked him. I didn't ask his name. Instead, I ordered a second camera. And I stayed home all week. Waiting. Watching. And documenting everything. They came on a Wednesday. 6:07 a.m. I was already dressed. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, sitting in the living room, watching the feed from both cameras, mug of cold coffee clenched in my hands. The truck pulled up without sound, city landscaping department logo on the side, but no city employee uniforms. Just 2 men in plain navy shirts and gloves. One held a clipboard. The other had a chainsaw. I stepped outside before they reached the sidewalk. Can I help you? I asked, voice loud, clear, shaking slightly. The man with the clipboard flipped a page. We're here on HOA orders to remove a tree in violation of community codes. Should only take a few minutes. I stepped between them and the tree. You're not touching it. He raised his eyebrows. Ma'am, we have work orders. Do you have a removal permit? City authorization? He hesitated. We were told this was private HOA jurisdiction. It's not. This strip is easement land. City-owned. That tree was planted with permission from the Parks Department. I have the email. And you're on camera. The guy with the chainsaw glanced at me, then at the camera by the porch. He said nothing, but he turned the engine off. Look, clipboard guy said, suddenly softer. We're just contractors. If there's a mistake, we'll step back. I held up my phone and started recording. This is an unauthorized attempt by the Silver Pines HOA to remove a memorial tree dedicated to a deceased child. These workers were instructed by HOA leadership, without a permit. I am documenting this as evidence. Clipboard guy held up his hand. We're leaving. All good. They got back in the truck and drove off. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. Private number. I let it ring. Then another call. Then a voicemail. I played it. You think you've won? You're just making this harder for everyone. For yourself. It was Cynthia. I forwarded the voicemail to the police department's community liaison. Then I emailed the city permitting office. Then the newspaper. By lunchtime, the third article was up. HOA allegedly attempts unauthorized removal of memorial tree, resident intervenes. This time, it went national. By 5 p.m., CNN had reposted it. The story wasn't about a tree anymore. It was about a grieving mother being bullied by a neighborhood government. At 7 p.m., I opened the door to find a small group gathered outside my house. Neighbors. Parents. Strangers. They brought candles. Flowers. A handwritten card. One woman sobbed as she placed a photo of her own lost child beneath the tree. And suddenly, the cherry blossoms weren't just petals. They were witnesses. That night, I stood by the tree until dawn. And the next morning, the news vans were already arriving. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. By then, the story had spread far beyond Silver Pines. I'd been contacted by advocacy groups, a pro bono attorney, and even a daytime talk show producer. But I wasn't interested in celebrity. I wasn't fighting for attention. I was fighting for a tree. For my daughter. For every person who had been humiliated, silenced, or threatened by people like Cynthia hiding behind fake professionalism and printed rulebooks. And now, I had leverage. The lawyer, Aaron Blackwell, was a specialist in municipal law and civil rights. She volunteered after seeing the news coverage and offered to help file an injunction against the HOA. We sat at my kitchen table surrounded by copies of HOA bylaws, printed emails, screenshots, and statements from other residents. "Here's what we do," she said. "First, we establish that the land is not fully under HOA jurisdiction. Second, we argue selective enforcement, emotional discrimination. Third, we push for a cease and desist." "What's the cost?" I asked. She smiled. "Covered. Don't worry. I've seen too many of these bullies get away with it." She meant it. The day before the board meeting, we filed the paperwork. We also sent Cynthia a formal cease and desist notice for harassment. By then, the city had issued a statement confirming that the tree's placement did not violate any municipal ordinances. And the police had opened a file on the unauthorized removal attempt and threatening voicemail. Cynthia was suddenly very quiet. Friday night. The room was packed. Local news cameras in the back. Folding chairs filled. People standing along the walls. Cynthia opened the meeting with a nervous smile, trying to move through the agenda like it was business as usual. But item 3, landscaping disputes, stopped her cold. A voice from the back interrupted. "We want to hear from the mother. Let her speak." Applause followed. And Cynthia had no choice but to nod. I stood. My heart hammered. But my voice was steady. 2 years ago, I lost my daughter in an accident a block from this neighborhood. We planted that tree as a way to remember her, to heal. And this board tried to erase that. Gasps, murmurs, someone saying, "Disgusting. You tried to fine me, silence me, intimidate me. You called my child's memorial unauthorized vegetation. But what you really hate is that something beautiful grew without your permission." Someone shouted amen from the back. I looked directly at Cynthia. "I'm not just asking to keep that tree. I'm asking for your resignation. For all of you who stood by and let it happen." And the room exploded. It didn't end there. But that was the night the cracks began to show. And for once, Cynthia didn't have the last word. ChatGPT. The fallout was swift. By Saturday morning, 3 members of the HOA board had resigned. Not Cynthia, not yet, but the treasurer, the secretary, and 1 committee lead stepped down with short, carefully worded statements about disagreements in direction and personal ethics concerns. The neighborhood Facebook group, once strictly monitored and censored, became a wildfire. Residents posted fines they'd received for things like lawn chairs, window decals, even kids' sidewalk chalk drawings. One post went viral. "Cynthia fined us $100 for our daughter's lemonade stand. Called it unlicensed commerce. My daughter was 7. People were angry. But they weren't afraid anymore." I kept my head down. Aaron handled the legal filings, the press interviews. I stayed home, took walks around the block, and watered the cherry blossom tree every morning. It had started to shed petals. A soft pink blanket forming around its base. One morning, a man approached me as I trimmed weeds around the trunk. Older, tall, sunburned neck, baseball cap. "You the tree, Mom?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me an envelope, thick, folded once, no name. From someone who can't speak publicly. "Read it." Then he walked off. Inside the envelope, copies of internal HOA memos. Meeting notes. A list of problem addresses flagged for future enforcement. And 1 line scribbled in pen. They used your daughter's case as a distraction, while approving a private pool fund for Cynthia. A pool. Paid for, at least in part, with HOA reserve funds. No votes. No announcements. Just quietly siphoned. Erin's eyes widened when I showed her. "This is embezzlement," she said. "And it's going to blow everything wide open." Within 24 hours, we had filed a formal complaint with the county auditor and the city's legal department. Then we handed everything to the press. The next headline hit harder than any before. HOA president accused of misusing funds, targeting grieving resident. Silver Pines was no longer a neighborhood story. It was national news. HOA watchdog groups cited it. Local politicians called for oversight reforms. Even John Oliver mentioned it on his show. Cynthia, once untouchable, was now radioactive. And still, the tree stood. Quiet. Blooming. Untouched. For now. The special election to remove Cynthia was scheduled for the following Thursday. A full neighborhood vote, something rarely triggered, was now unavoidable. The petition had surpassed the required threshold. Public pressure made stalling impossible. Every mailbox had a ballot. Every household had a choice. Remove her. Or keep pretending this was okay. I didn't campaign. I didn't need to. The footage of the attempted tree removal had already made its way into multiple exposés. Cynthia's voicemail had aired twice on local news. And the documents from the anonymous source, the private pool fund, the problem address list, had sealed the narrative. Silver Pines wasn't just a cautionary tale anymore. It was a revolution in suburbia. The night before the vote, Cynthia did what all self-righteous tyrants eventually do. She cracked. She posted a letter on the HOA's website and tacked printed versions to every neighborhood bulletin board. It was titled, "A Letter from Your President, My Truth." It was 3 pages of victimhood. She blamed the media. The emotional manipulation of a grieving mother. Cyberbullying. Mob mentality. A coordinated smear campaign. She ended it with, "I have done nothing wrong. I have only enforced the rules equally. But if the majority no longer respects those rules, I suppose democracy must run its course." The last sentence was underlined. My inbox flooded. Neighbors sent screenshots. One person shoved the printed letter through my mail slot with LOL scrawled in Sharpie. The vote was held at the community center. A line formed at 7 a.m. By noon, the news vans were back. By 6 p.m., the ballots were counted. She was removed. Overwhelmingly. 82% in favor of removal. Only a handful voted to keep her. She didn't show up to the results announcement. But I did. I stood in the middle of the now crowded room, not as the center of attention, not as a victim, but as someone who had survived something ugly and pointless and cruel, and won. Later that night, I walked to the tree. Someone had tied a yellow ribbon around its trunk. A candle flickered at its base. And pinned to the wooden plaque beneath her name, I found a note. "We see her. We see you. Thank you for fighting." The day after Cynthia's removal, the HOA went silent. No emails. No flyers. No compliance reminders on front doors. It was almost peaceful. Like a toxic cloud had been sucked out of the air. But I knew better than to believe it was over. Because Cynthia might have been removed, but her decisions, her fines, threats, and punishments still lingered in every home, mailbox, and memory. And someone needed to clean that up. Within a week, an interim board was elected, people who had supported the petition, neighbors with actual empathy and basic human decency. Among them, Sarah Patel, mother of 2, teacher, fined for a Halloween skeleton. Mike Jensen, retired firefighter, fined for his American flag. Denise Cho, lawyer, fined for planting sunflowers. They called me the night they were sworn in. "Would you be willing to serve on the review committee?" I hesitated. I hadn't fought this fight to become part of the machine. But then I looked out the window at the tree. Yes, I said. I'll do it. But I'm not playing by Cynthia's rulebook. They laughed. That's why we asked you. The first order of business. Nullify all fines issued under the Visual Harmony Clause. Second, review any past board expenditures over $1,000. Third, officially protect the memorial tree under HOA and city recognition as a historical symbol. We voted. All passed unanimously. Meanwhile, the city's legal department continued investigating the misuse of HOA funds. And Cynthia? She finally lawyered up. Publicly, she disappeared. Privately, I knew she was fuming. Her pool project had been frozen. Her personal reserve, uncovered in the audit, was being reviewed by authorities. Even her personal property was under scrutiny due to the improper transfer of association funds. It was quiet. But it was justice. One morning, about a month after the vote, I got a knock on the door. It was the same man who had delivered the envelope weeks ago. The whistleblower. I just wanted to say thank you, he said. A lot of us wanted to speak up. You gave us the courage. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I nodded. We did this together. He looked past me at the tree. She'd be proud, you know. I smiled. I hope so. Because in a world where so many things are taken, memories, peace, even permission to grieve, that little tree still stood. Alive. Rooted. And finally, untouchable. The city came out in early June to install the plaque. Black metal, gold lettering. Mounted on a short post next to the cherry blossom tree. I didn't write the inscription, the board did. But when I read it, I had to sit down on the porch for a moment. In memory of Emily Ellis, 2013 to 2022. Planted by love, defended by courage. This tree stands as a reminder that compassion must always be stronger than rules. Recognized historic landmark, Silver Pines HOA and City of Westfield. Neighbors came out to watch. Someone brought lemonade. A little girl placed a single pink flower at the base of the tree and asked me if she could draw a butterfly for Emily. I said yes. That was the beginning of something different, not just healing, but rebuilding. The new board launched a community healing initiative. Fines were reviewed and refunded. An open forum was created for resident feedback. The bylaws were rewritten to include a clause for humanitarian exceptions. I helped draft it. We even planted 2 more trees, one for another child lost years ago, whose parents had been too afraid to ask for anything. And another, just because. The HOA finally remembered it was supposed to be about people. Not power. I was invited to speak at a city council meeting that summer. The topic, HOA reform ordinances. I stood at the podium and told our story, the whole thing, from the letter on my doorstep to the night Cynthia was voted out. I ended with this. We followed the rules, until the rules tried to erase my daughter. I didn't ask for a fight, but I finished it. And if this city ever wonders how far a grieving parent will go to defend what's sacred, just ask Silver Pines. They gave me a standing ovation. Not that I needed it. Life moved on, slowly. But every year, on the anniversary of Emily's accident, something strange started happening. Neighbors, even ones I didn't know well, would stop by. Some dropped flowers. Some left notes. One man left a guitar pick with her name written on it in Sharpie. Another woman baked cupcakes. It was quiet. Organic. Unspoken. And it meant everything. Because what Cynthia and her board never understood was this. That tree wasn't just for Emily. It was for all of us. A reminder that in a world filled with cold systems and arbitrary rules, we can still choose kindness. And we can still win. Even here. Even now. Even against them. A year later, on the morning of Emily's birthday, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in months, children laughing outside. I looked out the window. There were balloons tied to the cherry blossom tree. Not from me. Someone had hung pink and white streamers from the lower branches. There were hand-drawn cards, glittery drawings, and small paper butterflies fluttering in the wind. A sidewalk chalk message curved around the trunk. Happy birthday, Emily. We remember you. I sat on the porch swing, hands in my lap, throat tight. A little girl rode past on her bike, slowed, and waved. She's the reason we got to keep our garden lights, she said. My mom said so. And just like that, I understood. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. It was about the story people remembered. About how one act of cruelty exposed a system. And how enough voices, when united, could drown out even the loudest tyrant. Cynthia moved out of Silver Pines 6 months after the vote. Word was, she tried to join another HOA board in a neighboring community. She was politely turned down. The cherry blossom tree bloomed again that spring, fuller than ever. The city sent a crew to install a small bench nearby. The plaque stood untouched. People walked by and nodded. Saturday. Reflected. Hugged their kids a little tighter. And no one ever tried to remove it again. Sometimes, I still find notes at its base. Slips of paper. Drawings. Tokens. Some from grieving parents. Some from kids who never knew Emily but felt her story. One letter, folded carefully in plastic, said, I didn't think anyone would believe me. But after what you did, I told my mom what the teacher had been doing. Thank you for being brave. That one I framed. So here's what I know. You can't reason with cruelty. You can't outlogic tyranny. But you can survive it. And if you're loud enough, brave enough, relentless enough, you can plant something stronger than fear. Something with roots. And no matter how many fines they send, no matter how many chainsaws they bring, some things you just can't cut down.